Oh. Well, good morning, Jesus Collective. It's so good to see you. It's Sunday, August 28th, 2022. Today's theme is Can I Have Your Attention? By our very own Caroline Greeven. In a moment, you will see this CR code again. It leads to our giving link. You can also contribute on Venmo at Jesus Collective. You may also send a check or money order to P.O. Box 1661, Santa Barbara, zip code 93116. Join us for communion after our prayer and conversation. Use whatever items you have on hand to take as bread and wine. Wednesdays are heartwarming and uplifting. We hope everyone gets to experience the love. And you're going to get a preview from Caroline today. And those that haven't been joining us, I think you're going to want to be a part. You're going to want to get on board again. We'd like to remind you of the memorial service for our very own Willeen Joyce Watson. This is the mom of Shella Duet. The service is Saturday, September 3rd, 2022, 11 a.m. at the Funeral Mortuary Home del Angel Oxnard. And the address is 401 West Channel Islands Boulevard, Oxnard, California. And that's on the corner of C Street and Channel Islands Boulevard. You're welcome to join after service at Golden Corral Buffet and Grill if you want to come and fellowship more with the Dewitt family. Next Sunday's theme, what we found enticing and how we escape. On 9/11, we will have a surprise guest. And then 9/11, that's September 11th, we will have a surprise guest. And also on October 2nd, we will host Lois Capps speaking on the new religious right. We have a quote here from Walter Capps. The prolonged national suffering and collective post traumatic over what happened to the United States in the Vietnam War had indeed stimulated deep soul searching. Such soul searching could serve as a powerful, nurturing environment toward the restoration of national pride. And the restoration of national pride can find powerful support and instrumentation within the conservative temper. Looking at in this way, it might have been expected that the necessary restitution and resuscitation of the threatened national ideal would provoke or rekindle a resolute or even feisty sovereignty. This is a quote from Walter Capps. There's that CR code we were talking about. If you want to just click on that with your cell phone, it'll take you right through to our site where you can give freely and give with a joyful heart. We thank you today. And now for our community reading by Dr. Trina.
Good morning, everyone. Saint Perpetua and Saint Felicity, who shared a holy kiss before dying, patron saints of same sex couples, pray for us.
Saint Michael, Judge, Fire Brigade, Chaplain, and First Martyr of 9/11, ordained but not uncanonized by the Church on account of your queer spirit. Pray for an end to violence against all people.
Our Lady of the Rainbow, Mother of Diversity, we, your LGBTQ children, call on you. Comfort, guide, inspire, liberate, and protect us. Wrap us in your rainbow mantle as our Mother of Pride.
Like Saint Bayard Rustin, may we stand up and speak out for our LGBTQ dreams.
Dame Julian of Norwich, who celebrated Mother Jesus, pray for the gender fluid.
King David and Jonathan,
Extraordinary.
whose love was
Passing the
extraordinary,
love of women according
passing the love of
scriptures, pray
women
for us.
according to the Hebrew scriptures, pray for us.
Saint Francis of Assisi, gender nonconformist, who loved all creation without limits, pray for us.
Saint Philip, who welcomed the Ethiopian eunuch to the earthly church, role model for LGBTQ plus allies, pray for sexual minorities and cast your welcome into their hearts.
Bygone two-spirit people, whose spirit lives on in our land, inspire us to reclaim gender diversity.
Pulse 49 martyrs and 53 wounded of Orlando, shielding those who love with their own
With your own
bodies.
bodies, pray for us.
And lend us your
Lend us your
courage.
courage.
All
All
who have
who have
lived
lived
and died for love,
peace, and justice, pray for us.
Justice, pray for us. Let us pray. David.
We long for you. Today we reach out to you. We are questing. And today we acknowledge that the earth is yours and that we are yours and that we occupy Chumash lands and that other indigenous lands are represented here today. We acknowledge that you created these indigenous families just as you created all these territories that we wrongly call property. We come today longing for the way, the truth, and the life. And today we experience the words of Jesus as they lead to an awareness and experience of the sacred and the oneness and unity of all life. We hunger for reality. Misinformation and misjudgment have been such a fog, but the fog inspires us to keep looking. Today, we are all searching hearts. That's who we are. And while we have all experienced disappointment, we have also shared complete joy. It reminds us that the world will see another winter and another spring, and we are grateful. Thank you so much that we are each part of this timeless, boundless chain of generations that is the focus of your love. Love is our truth. The truth is we are loved, not just lucky, but loved. The truth is that there are loving people in the world and they heal us. We're being healed. The truth of love is healing. It's like music, whether we are burdened, grateful, sorry, overjoyed. We need our music, your music. So for the person among us today who is suffering and the other person who is celebrating, we are conscious and respectful of each person, each family's presence. We are all trying to see our way. That's our truth. We ask for truth to be offered today, to be affirmed in these moments that we have together. Even if it seems like we're being fed far more lies these days, and that's a heavy burden, we are also happy to have not accepted the lie. We do not believe the lie that any of us should devalue our story because we are impressed with someone else's. Besides, we don't know the rest of your story. We do not believe the lie that some person other than one's self should direct our sexual or gender identity. We do not believe the lie that any of us is more important than the other. We do not believe the lie that war or violence of any kind can repair our failings. We are thirsty for you, for revelation, for truth. We're not ashamed to acknowledge that we're thirsty for you. And if the truth is love, then a lie is hate. We're happy to be in love today because love wins. And so may it be that today, may it be that this week, somebody that I encounter would see the light that shines out from me, that shines out from us, and may they find hope, resurrecting hope. Amen. Amen. So let's take a moment to say hello to each other and get the pleasure of our encounters maximized.
I accidentally came back.
How did you do that?
It there was some button that said, like, I don't know what it said, but I pushed the button and it sent me. Oh, there's Rhonda. She was in my group too and watching. Okay.
Okay, you got something going good.
And Lisa too. Okay, somehow we all came back.
Well, you'll have to share. I'll have to look for what button you pressed to do that.
Welcome back, everybody. Well, let me, for those who may not have been here at the beginning, let me just mention again that Michael's brother passed away yesterday unexpectedly. They were close, and this is hitting him very hard. And so let's remember him in our prayers. And Linnea as well, the father of her children, is nearing the end, it appears, as well. And so this is a very difficult time for them. And I know that everyone understands what it means to be with someone who's experienced loss. Today, we are going to hear from our own Caroline Greeven. So she did us proud in the 9 a.m. session. Yeah, she was such a blessing. And more than one person thought at the end that her presentation should also be an op-ed somewhere. And so, and you'll see what we're talking about in just a moment. Caroline lives in Ventura. She's a collaborator and ghostwriter with a background as a literary agent. Her recent writing projects include business and innovation guides. Her work includes celebrity memoirs like, lifestyle and DIY guides, and Rick James's memoir, Confessions of a Super Freak. She's also worked as an editor and a book doctor for publishers such as Harper One, Crown, and Bonus Books, and authors such as Mike Ness of the legendary punk band Social Distortion. I know Caroline because we have a mutual friend who is Christian's a TV producer. And when he knew that I was going to write a book, he connected me with Caroline, and she's the first person that I consulted. And so we had coffee at nearby Starbucks the first time that we talked. And then later she came to my first book signing event, graciously hosted by the Unitarian Universalist Society here in Goleta. And then we kept communicating, and then she started coming to Church for the Nations that I used to lead in Oxnard. And now she's been with us from the beginning of Jesus Collective, over a year and a half old. She's not a stranger to those who've been a part of us, but she's bringing such a gift to us today. So everybody, can you just give some big time thanks to Caroline for sharing with us today?
Hello. Hi, everybody. Thank you for that beautiful introduction. Loved it.
Wait. I think you're muted. Are you muted? No, you're not. You're good.
No.
Okay.
I'm good. All right. Well, this is my third time speaking, and I got to admit that every time Pastor David asked me to give one of these talks, I spent quite a bit of time trying to figure out what on earth I could possibly say. What could I talk about that is worth 20 minutes of your Sunday to share? After all, we all have busy lives full of things to see and do. It can begin to feel like a weighty responsibility. Suppose I waste your time. What if my words and ideas aren't worth your attention? Finally, it occurred to me, suppose that's what we talk about. After all, we all know that we have finite time in this world. So what do we choose to pay attention to? And what do we choose to focus on during those years that we do have? First, though, a question. Does anyone here feel like they just can't pay attention anymore? I know I do. I can't seem to follow a chain of thought or for more than, on a good day, maybe 60 seconds. Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. I've lost what feels like years of my life to their endless content. My husband comments on it. He sees me sitting on my phone, loading up all the outrages of the day, scrolling faster and faster, barely absorbing one hit of outrage before I'm on to the next. These outrages are rarely things I've witnessed or experienced myself. Often they are the actions of people who are determinedly unreachable. Supposedly Democratic senators who prioritize venture fund owners over the poor, or who demand more fossil fuel extractions in exchange for climate change legislation. Worse, they are little pinpricks of cruelty and absurdity. A Southern judge refusing parole to a person who has clearly earned a second chance after decades of model behavior inside. A conservative governor waiting until the morning of an execution to commute the sentence of an obviously innocent man. My addiction to information isn't new. I'm a news junkie after all, and I always have been. My 83-year-old father still reads the New York Times cover to cover every morning. My mother insisted on keeping her subscription to the London Telegraph, even when her dementia was so bad that she could no longer read it. In fact, it is one of my greatest shames that I canceled her subscription to save money, because I no longer saw the point in her holding an unopened copy of a pretty expensive daily paper on her lap. It is one of my greatest griefs that I didn't see what that newspaper meant. What comfort she took from her image of herself as an engaged, informed citizen. How the weight of that broadsheet with all its different sections and Sunday magazines made her feel like herself. I wish I could go back in time and let her keep her unopened paper, along with that sliver of herself that loved to read the news and know what was happening. I've moved a lot over my life, and my memories are full of front page stories from the Newport Daily News, the Miami Herald, the Guardian, the New York Times, the Santa Fe New Mexican, the Chicago Tribune, the LA Times, the Ventura County Star, and the Jackson Hole Daily. And I've never actually been inside a newsroom, but I swear I can hear the rumble of the printing press in the basement and feel the presence of Hildy Johnson sitting archly on the corner of a desk, working those rotary phones and bantering with Cary Grant. I kept, for years, the black and white Miami Herald cover story announcing Princess Diana had died, and I can still feel the visceral shock as I walked from the newspaper rack back to my apartment, engrossed in the awful news, but also contained by the limits of the newspaper. I didn't have a TV, I had only rudimentary internet, and I rarely listened to the radio. So the Herald was more or less it in terms of knowing what happened. Frankly, it didn't occur to me that I needed more. Here's an interesting fact, according to author Johan Hari in his book, Stolen Focus, which I've pulled some facts and quotes from for this talk. In 1986, if you added up all the information being blasted at the average human being, TV, radio, reading, it amounted to 40 newspapers worth of information every day. By 2007, they found it had risen to the equivalent of 174 newspapers per day, and it's gone up even more since then. No wonder our minds are whirling with ideas and information. Talking about the ever-growing deluge of information and how our attention and focus respond to it might seem like a very secular topic for Sunday morning at church. In fact, Stolen Focus dives deep on everything we lose by losing our ability to focus, but it barely touches the spiritual costs of our inattention. Yet this aspect seems crucial to me, no matter what your religious affiliation. After all, if you can't pay attention to your gods, or your friends of Bill style higher power, how can you have a relationship with them? If you can't stop thinking long enough to simply feel their presence, how real can they be? Lisa was kind enough to share with me Paul's letters to the Galatians. And though full disclosure, I'm not a deep cut Bible kind of person, Even I can sense his frustration with his easily distracted brethren. "You foolish Galatians," he says, "who has bewitched you?" He goes on, "Are you so foolish? After beginning by means of the Spirit, are you now trying to finish by means of the flesh?" Those Galatians could not keep their attention focused on the things that were truly important. Instead, like all of us, they were bewitched away by something else. I see those competing spirits and flesh in my own mind. There are things I know are worthy of my attention, but how often am I distracted by the easier, the more enjoyable? How many times have I picked up a worthy book only to put it down again and again to snoop on a stranger's stories? Often a stranger who I find inherently unlikable to begin with. Perhaps Paul understood the finite amount of attention we can all hold, and how quickly we all are able to get distracted from our paths. Perhaps even then, unscrupulous actors understood the value of another person's stolen focus. There is a tension between what we want to focus on and what we actually focus on. You can't blame our brains. They were designed to conserve energy at all costs. Our brains will often follow a heuristic or cognitive shortcut rather than considering a new solution to a familiar problem from scratch. Likewise, our chains of thought dig metaphorical grooves into our brains, even if we want to change the way we think, or perhaps allow new ideas to replace old ones. We can't easily do so. Those paths and shortcuts may allow our brains to function optimally, but they also trap us in outmoded thoughts and ways of thinking, sapping us of the joy of spontaneity, creativity, and discovery that are so crucial to a fully lived life. For me, attention is faith, and focus is devotion. Distraction and an overcrowded, overwhelmed mind are antithetical to connection, either with each other or our spiritual faith. Most of the times I have felt closest to any kind of real spiritual epiphany are times where I have been alone within an environment, either natural or man-made, that transcends description. Waking up in the middle of the night while camping to see the Milky Way overhead. There is nothing else, simply you and eternity. It's wonderful. I'm sure you've all had similar experiences. In those moments, our minds stop spinning and the world begins to unfurl its mysteries, allowing our most subtle senses to see and feel them around us. Our attention both broadens into a deeper perception and narrows into absolute focus on what really matters. We can see an outline of a doorway that, if we were able to open it, will lead to the mysteries that quite literally surround us, but are often hidden from our distracted minds. And those mysteries are all around us, waiting to be noticed. In the church in my mother's village that was built in the Anglo-Saxon era, well over 1,500 years ago, there is a handwritten list of every priest or vicar who has ever led it. Those names, written in large cursive, barely covered one side of paper, as each man's time spanned a good half-century or so. Imagine that attention, that focus. The stones that pave the floor of the church have shallow paths worn in them, a physical representation of the paths we have in our brains, thinking the same thoughts over and over again. Walking those paths in our brains is involuntary, but imagine the commitment, the belief, and the perseverance it takes for a community to wear those paths in stone. A few villages over, another ancient church, just outside of Oxford, has an enduring statement of belief and hope. During World War II, a distraught mother commissioned a stained glass portrait of her son, killed in action. He looks down from his place in the slender, pointed early English windows, immobilized on glass, frozen in lead, set back in deep bowls of stone. How surprised that young man, perhaps miraculously revived, might be to find himself there. And how single-minded, how focused his mother must have been to place him there. Before I left church, I added a note to the book of prayers, asking for them for my mother. This is not something I would generally do, but I felt the possibility that comes with attention. I felt the power of thousands of years of faith. Even if I couldn't quite feel the presence of God with the conviction of those long dead parishioners, I felt the way their beliefs still lingered in the air and the stone and the bronze and brass and wood, and it was enough. I picked up the pen and added my request to 1,500 years of prayers. Please heal our wounded bodies. Please revive our failing crops. Please reverse our unjust punishments and return our stolen animals. Please comfort our mothers. If I'm completely honest, I can't say I was deep in communion with God or necessarily feeling Jesus's presence in my heart like others have described. But in that moment, I felt a profound focus and a sense of continuity with 1,000+ years of my predecessors, and it was enough. Buddhist tradition talks of the unfettered mind. Transcendental meditators aim to find stillness and expansiveness within. The Aboriginal writer Madruru says that Aboriginal spirituality is built around a feeling of oneness, of belonging, a connectedness with deep innermost feelings. Everything else is secondary. That is what faith boils down for me. A sense that we are not alone, that we belong to the long lineage of humanity, that those things that separate us are false and illusionary, that most humans are our brothers and sisters, that most of us are united by a desire to love and be loved, that if they offered the chance, most would choose to be kind and to be our best selves. And perhaps most relevantly, that if we are divided, if we are turned against each other, it is because it is to the benefit of the divider to have us that way. These ideas feel natural and good, yet the forces that shape our online world seem to work in direct opposition to these ideals. The writer Audre Lorde famously said that caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. I'd add to that and say that protecting our attention, our focus, and our clarity of thought is likewise an act of purposeful, strategic, and essential rebellion. Refusing to participate in or be sidetracked by subjective outrage, and instead seeking out and supporting objective truth, is an act of community building. And yes, I understand that the concept of objective truth can be nebulous at times. My favorite podcast's tagline is, "It was capitalism all along." It's funny, but they aren't joking. And the more I ponder where my ability to think, feel, or connect deeply, either to God or the world around me, has gone, the more I'm convinced that these qualities have been sacrificed to benefit some truly unscrupulous players. After all, refusing to be distracted is radically anti-capitalist. Turning off your notifications is a powerful act of boundary setting. Deleting social media apps is a rebellion against the richest and most powerful people in our society. These social media companies that are seeking to hijack our attention understand this. They tweak their algorithms, enhance their features, add filters, whatever it takes to get us to walk down those well-worn pathways of distraction, outrage, and separation one more time. Now imagine a company which subjects its over 15,000 moderators to viewing unspeakably horrific flagged content. Murders, rapes, child abuse, animal abuse, live stream massacres. Imagine a company that wantonly and shamelessly causes havoc in nascent democracies, or expands into countries where has no moderators who even speak the local languages. In Ethiopia, for instance, where this company has no moderators who speak Amharic or Oromo, and thus did nothing to stop the threats of violence against the Tigrayan people. Imagine a company that actively helps people like Bolsonaro in Brazil come to power. Imagine a company which fully understands its bottom line relies on our anger, our visceral rage, and our manufactured hatred for each other. This company is, of course, Facebook. Here's the conundrum, though. These companies cause great harm, yet these companies can also be invaluable and beneficial. They can give artists and writers an outlet to share their work and build businesses. They can enable people who are in any way and for any reason isolated from their communities and those they love a place to find friendship and like-minded folks. I loved Facebook when I first joined. I made friends and created a local sewing group based off of the women I met through the site. For years, our group page was my #1 favorite thing on the internet. We had a lively and lovely group chat thread, posted pictures of the things we were sewing and the babies we were having. Even as our group dispersed across America, the connection stayed strong. Eventually, however, that joy was submerged by awful arguments with old friends and terrible lies spread by elder relatives who didn't understand the algorithm was not being honest with them. You've probably had a similar experience. I like to imagine a Facebook that is still a joy to be on, that doesn't bring out the very worst in myself and the people I love. I like to imagine a Facebook that rewards thoughtful conversations and measured responses rather than impulsive lizard brain reactions. And I believe these companies have the possibility to be so good, and I believe they have a responsibility to be good. After all, they have supplanted our newspapers and our town squares. So surely they should at least be held to the same standards as those old civic staples were. I'm famous in my family for my letters to the editor, but who do you write to at Facebook? How do you attempt to hold it to account? Perhaps the most indicative thing about Facebook is that it has consistently rejected suggestions that would be beneficial for the communities it claims to serve. For instance, a few years back, an engineer suggested a feature that would alert users whenever two people who had mutually designated each other as close friends were within a few miles of each other. Imagine the possibilities for those kinds of serendipitous, spontaneous meetings that are essential to connection, community, and friendship. Yet Facebook realized that getting people offline and out into the real world would actively harm its engagement-based business model, so it was scrapped. The author of Stolen Focus suggests that a subscription model, rather than the current free model, which is subsidized by selling our data, could be an enormous engine for good. Imagine if Facebook no longer felt compelled to prioritize constant outraged engagement above all else, but could focus on creating real community instead. Imagine if it no longer elevated disinformation that pleases our lizard brains and generates frenetic reposts and comments, but instead promoted posts that are factually accurate and unbiased. These companies have a choice to look deeply at themselves, acknowledge everything wrong with their business model and their attitudes towards society and us as individuals, and begin to repair what they have broken. And I would argue that we have a responsibility to demand they change as well. Frankly, we should be righteously angry at these companies' gaslighting of us, their users, and evasion of responsibility. They encourage us to believe that we have a problem with social media, that if we have a problem with social media, it's our fault. That if we are too weak-willed to simply put down our phones and get on with the things that matter to us, well, that's our bad. Here's the truth. As a former Google engineer, Tristan Harris put it, the race to get attention has become more and more aggressive. We have to predict how to keep you hooked. So we crawled deeper down the brainstem into your social validation, which triggered the introduction of likes and followers. Instead of getting your attention, it was much cheaper to get you addicted to getting attention from other people. In the last few years, we have seen just how hard we need to fight to preserve the things that we love about our communities, our friends, our families, and our world. As I write, a vastly wealthy Republican has gifted another $1.5 billion tax-free to the brilliant minds behind such hits as the Federalist Society. Trust me, these people are very focused on getting what they want. And there's little they want more than 300 million Americans sitting in front of their screens, soaking up the absurd belief that this country is filled with either patriots or traitors, and you need to pick a side now. The angrier we are, the more our attention jumps between Twitter hot takes, YouTube deep dives, and never-ending Facebook comment wars, the less we notice both the good and the bad that is happening in the actual physical world that surrounds us. And perhaps, like me, you find it hard to feel that spiritual side of yourself and to engage deeply with it. We will need our attention sharp, our focus on point, if we want to prevail against this kind of abusive domination in our country. In fact, I think along with civil rights, women's rights, LGBTQIA+ rights, and climate justice, we need to add the fight to a focused, clear mind to that list. This country once rallied to fight back against smog and industrial pollution. It took a river catching fire in Ohio and a book on the horrors of DDT to do it. But both left and right rallied to save something we all agreed was precious. Richard Nixon supported the founding of the EPA. I would argue that social media, as it is currently structured, is another kind of pollution. I mean, nobody designed Facebook to be terrible, just as no one ever designed a factory to deliberately give people cancer. The ill effects came out of benign or good intentions. With regulation, balance can be restored. I think Facebook and all other social media has the potential to be a net positive again. But just as we outlawed the lead that once went into our gasoline, we need to find a way to legislate out the most toxic, dangerous elements of social media and ensure that it does as little harm as possible. We can look back now and agree that the lead that our children have been harmed and damaged by is a terrible thing. Agreeing that didn't mean we had to give up on cars, though. It simply meant we had to find a way to make gasoline better. And to extend the metaphor, we are still actively legislating and developing ways to make cars less harmful in the near future. The social media companies have, despite literally causing genocides, escaped any similar legislation. Why? We can live happily with social media, but it must be a social media that prioritizes truth, transparency, and ethical behavior over engagement. In closing, if I can encourage anything, I hope I can encourage you to fight for your right to focus on the things that actually matter to you and that you care about. I hope I can encourage you to view social media as something that can be benign or can be dangerous, but must be regulated and made to work for us rather than shareholders. Our attention is a precious, finite, and irreplaceable resource, and most, if not all, of the entities that are actively seeking to break it do not deserve our time, our eyeballs, or the mental energy they are draining away from us. So turn off those notifications you don't really need. Delete those apps. Use social media in a way that serves you, not them. Treasure your focus and guard your attention. And may I recommend the unchanging joy of unfurling a crisp newspaper and sitting down to read the news of the day. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was amazing, Caroline. It's interesting to hear you speak. I don't know that I have before because it gives me an idea of how you write. So that's really interesting. I mean, the research you did for this and the reflection on yourself you did for this was something that I think that I probably should be doing and haven't done enough of. I'm going to ask everybody a question, so be ready for that. But first, the question I'm going to ask you all is if any of you have changed your approach to social media. And so I'm going to ask you that, but then so think about it. And first, I'm going to talk with Caroline just for a minute. So, I mean, I was thinking a little bit about the mysteries hidden from our distracted brains, and that thread that you went off on that. How much do you think we really are missing of the world around us and of our world?
I mean, speaking for myself, I think a lot. You know, I don't go for a walk without a podcast in my ears. Like, well, what am I missing by sort of listening to This American Life when I'm walking down the street?
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I have to force myself to be willing to be bored. Like I have to be willing to take the risk of being bored. You know, I go on a 1 hour walk every day, and I have to be willing to risk being bored for that walk so that I don't miss something astonishing. The other day I went for a walk and I was deep in my pod and I looked out on the water and there was a massive like feeding frenzy going on. You know, pelicans and dolphins and things jumping out of the water. And I was like, you know, I almost missed that. And
yeah.
So I think you have to take the risk of being bored and unentertained
Mhm.
if you want to try and see the things that, like, let's catch those mysteries.
And it seems like we have to be super mindful of that and super, I mean, it sounds like you figured that out, but I mean, we have to really think about that, because I think you're absolutely right. I mean, so have you, I mean, so what is your approach then to balancing social media and staying informed? I mean, do you, so you have you know, as you encouraged us, have you stopped looking at certain platforms? Do you find yourself, you know, okay, I'll give an hour a day to this and that's it, or I'll give an hour every other week, or, you know, I mean, do you have anything
Yeah,
that's worked for you?
I've got one tip. It's the one thing I do. I deleted them off my phones. So I have
Okay,
Twitter and I have Instagram, but they're only on my computer,
okay.
which means that when I leave the house, I leave them behind. And that really helps. Like the day that I stopped having Twitter and Instagram in my pocket was the day I started to get a little bit of my mind back. And I also have no notifications on my phone, not for nothing. And that really helps. And I deactivated Facebook because this is another whole talk, but yeah. Don't be on Facebook.
Well, I do know of I don't know at least one person in our group that has reduced their Facebook use. I mean, does anybody want to talk a little bit about, you know, how you have approached it and what maybe experiences you've had with social media and things that have reduced your happiness or pleasure in life or whatever, and how you've approached it?
Well, I got rid of all my friends on Facebook, and I only added like Jesus Collective and Liminal and my school counseling groups. And so all of a sudden now I was like happier when I read everything. I wasn't like getting angry. I wasn't like, you know, upset with my friends who have a different political view than me. But it hasn't changed my attention, because now I'm like, oh, I'm watching puppy videos, or I'm getting, oh, this is a great tip for school counseling. So it's kind of like, I still feel like I need to, you know, remove things so that I'm actually just there, just sitting there, maybe open to God or something.
That's actually a good tip though, because I miss the utility of Facebook, and in our previous group we talked about how Facebook essentially is a utility now. But that's actually sort of a good idea. I hadn't thought about that.
I think just this past week, like it finally, well, it's been a 2-week trial where I turned off the visual notifications on my phone of like that little number that shows up in icons and stuff, because I was like, I'm never gonna read the 4,000 emails that I didn't read up to now, and I don't need to know that there's a new update on this or that. I'll see it when I see it.
Yeah,
That's helped a lot.
that's
And
smart.
how,
Yeah.
in what way? How have you, I mean, has it changed your outlook, or?
Like, I would kind of look at my phone sometimes and think like, oh, I've got to check this because that number just went up, or oh, there's a note, what's the notification? And it's like, I don't care what it is. It's what's in front of me, really.
Right.
Like that actually matters versus what my phone is telling me what matters.
Yeah. Beautifully put.
Anybody else have any approaches with social media?
Well, I have a love-hate relationship, especially with Facebook. And, you know, it started years ago because Facebook basically is unaccountable. And, you know, there's no like customer service department, if you will, you know, so, you know, it's like the monopoly of monopolies. And so sometimes I take breaks. Like one time I took a break for Lent, you know, the 40 days of Lent. That's probably the longest. I took a week before last off, and we didn't get recorded on Facebook that Sunday because I had logged out of my account. And when it came time for me to bring Jesus Collective onto our group, I wasn't set up. So, but it shows you how reflexive it is, how much a big part I just assumed it would be there because it's just a part of life, so taking breaks has been healthy. And every time I take a break, like, whether it's a week or longer, when I never have this like, oh man, I really got to get back to Facebook. It's only when I'm in it that I do that. But once I'm off, right? Once I'm off for a week, it's like, I don't need to do this. But for some people, it's the only way they have of reaching me is on Messenger or in the group, right? Like, and so I have mixed feelings about the way that I use it. It's beneficial for our Jesus Collective group and our New Covenant group, and it's beneficial for those things. Like Margie was saying, that she's trying to be selective. Yeah.
But, I mean, honestly, I could write like a book about how Mark Zuckerberg is literally the most dangerous person in the world, just because he's so limited. Like, I don't think his conception of like his responsibilities extends beyond like, I don't even know what it extends, but he's a deeply limited person, and he can't conceive of that is his responsibility to do something about the harm he's causing. I don't know.
I guess the only thing we have is our control over what we look at.
But we really don't have control. I mean, we really don't. I mean, these companies, they exploit fundamental sort of, not weaknesses because they're just how we are, but how our brains work. So, and that's another really big thing that's happened, is that they've kind of offshored the responsibility for the problem onto us. But the problem is how they built this thing. It's not on us. It's not our failing. It's they built this impossible trap that it's almost impossible to escape.
Trina?
I'm thinking about the ways in which social media has impacted relationships with people, and the ways that folks who I used to be in community with or would talk to or have a conversation with, that the social media has replaced that. And, I'll talk to someone, and after so much time has gone by, and we'll be in a conversation, and they'll say, oh, I've moved 3 times, I've gotten married twice, I've had 6 kids, I've changed jobs 5 times. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that this is what was happening with you. And the response is, I posted it.
Yeah.
Like, you didn't see my post? And all of these major things within people's lives, including people who've come and gone out of their lives, or that have been really big things, that folks don't pick up the phone anymore and call and let people know, now that there's a way to just make it public. And then the accountability isn't on us to share information with people who should know that information. It's then on this public blast of, this is what's happening, and you should know everything that's happening in my life because I posted it.
Yeah. Well, what you're saying, it sort of reminds me, remember, I mean, I've never done this because it was a sort of like 20s, 30s, 40s things, when people would send, I think they were called like round robin letters. Like you had a circle of friends and you'd write a letter, and then that would get sent to you. Then you'd add to the letter and send it on to the next person. They'd add to the letter, and so you got kind of a letter that went around a whole group of friends. Do you remember hearing about those? Like, I just think that sounds like such a wonderful thing, and it would sort of address what you're talking about, and it probably did address what you're talking about in the past. But we assume Facebook works like that, but it doesn't.
Right.
It doesn't. Oh,
I just wanted to jump in on what you were saying before about how dangerous Mark Zuckerberg is and his corporation. I had no idea until I saw this TED Talk I just posted in chat about how really Brexit, I mean, most people didn't support it except for the algorithms that were going out. So it was like people just thought the majority of people were supporting
Right.
it. And here's a horrible political policy that just because of Facebook.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I could talk about Brexit for hours. I mean, it was completely manufactured, and it's had nightmarish repercussions for my family in England. I mean, it's terrible. It's truly terrible, and yeah, we could talk about it for hours.
Thank you, Margie, for posting that. Hasmin?
Hi.
Hi.
I wanted to say about well, all of what we're talking about. So about the idea of allowing yourself to be bored. I think it kind of goes back to the message that we had with I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but the doctor who does the soundscapes, and being open to listening to the world around us, because God's glory is in all of what we are exposed to in a lot of ways. And the simple act of putting a headphone in, it closes those doors. And then with regards to like what Trina was saying right now, I remember when we were planning my papa's memorial, we called all these people, and yes, it was just completely tumultuous to our soul and to our being to go through these phone calls and whatnot, but we felt like it was how it should be, and it was really only a few that said, it took us a while to do a post, to put it in a post so that it was on social media, so that people that we didn't have their number or that sort of thing might see it. But I know now, because other family members or loved ones have gone to be with the Lord since then, and we didn't know anything was going on until somebody said, oh, I saw a Facebook post, or I saw a post and this is what it said. And instead of commenting on the post, my mom and I picked up the phone and called the house, the landline, where those people live who made the post. And it's just that disconnect and lack of it's a lot of work to nurture relationships. And I can say honestly, like, the hypocrisy in me is that I have friends and loved ones that I don't talk to regularly, and I see their posts and I don't even comment on them. I'll add like an emoji response or something and feel like that's like I have an idea of what's going on with them, and I'm trying to, put it like watering a plant. Like, I put attention to it, and I do pick up the phone and call, but there's not really an answer on the other end a lot of times. And it's things like that really, I hope that there's some sort of drastic shift, which at this point would be like a regression to how things were, because I hate that idea of my child growing up and thinking that scanning on a screen and pushing a button or tapping the screen is the same as having a conversation or nurturing friendship or develop, like nurturing relationship, you know what I mean? Like it's so much better to hear and feel, touch, and give each other a hug. Yeah.
Or write a letter.
Right.
I would just, to that, I would say that Facebook doesn't need a customer service department, because the customers are the people selling our, people buying our data.
Right.
We are not their customers, so they
We're the
don't owe
product.
us. They don't owe us. They have no accountability
Yeah,
towards
we're the
us.
product.
And it's like just I was shopping for something from a private, seller like 3 days ago. And then like within an hour on Facebook, it had what I was looking for. We know how that works, right? They pretty much are, are in the market with everybody.
An article that I read to do this talk was written by Reuters, and I don't have the link, but it's called Hate Book, and it's about how they basically created a genocide in Myanmar and absolutely refused to take any responsibility. It's pretty shocking. Like at one point, representatives of the Rohingya people were going to Menlo Park and trying to meet with people there and trying to explain, like, people are dying and a lot more people are going to die, and the company refused. They don't see it as something that they're responsible for. But
Speaking of Myanmar, Diane and I watched this. We watched this. I don't know. I guess it's a documentary. Yeah, called Free Burma Rangers, FBR, Free Burma Rangers, on Prime, and it's not. There are no actors. It's going into this. It's a family that is leading an effort to rescue, people like the Rohingya and other marginalized people in Burma, and they're really sacrificing their life to do it. And it's an interesting take on things. They're doing it in the name of Jesus. So, just putting that recommendation out there, since Caroline's mentioned Myanmar a couple of times.
Yeah, thank you for that. Scott, I think you unmuted yourself. Did you want to add something?
Confession. I'm not even a dinosaur. I'm a fossil. I never had a Facebook account. The only there are no apps on my cell phone, which I'm afraid of, by the way. Other than I use it to text now. And the day I discovered emojis, it was like, I don't know. I don't like to give my cell phone number out, because then suddenly I'm being texted and stuff, and I don't want a lot of stupid stuff I say to be recorded for history. But I do love phone calls and landlines. So a lot of this is, well, the one thing that scared me is in my last couple of classes I taught in government course, we had to do a chapter on media and democracy. And I always do a poll about where do you get your news. And I've taught, one group was younger adults or working adults, and another group was traditional college students, overwhelmingly social media. And my God, if that doesn't scare us, I don't know what's going to. And they even know that it's problematic. And of course, then we went to Facebook and Twitter, and we're looking at how they handled the elections and the false information and stuff, and we critiqued that there. But I don't want to get off topic too much, but Caroline, the thing that grabbed me also when you were talking is when you talked about your mom and going back in history. And by the way, I love the Brits, especially their, you started out on a pedestal for me, I guess. I liked, as much as I know about the society, and I love British movies. And there was one that grabbed me called About Time. And it's,
oh yeah.
So it's a British comedy, a Britcom, where men in a family from generation to generation had the ability to go back in time and redo things. It's a really interesting story, but in the whole message, when you see the movie at the end, you realize it's the current time that is so sacred and precious, and how we have to be focused on it. anyway, that just kind of, you brought me back to that
Oh.
point. That and one of the things I think we all need to do is to take that time and have a conversation with ourselves. I think everybody should write a memoir, you know, one way or another. But anyway, but thanks. It was a great presentation, Sharon, today.
Oh, thank you.
I would write a memoir, but I don't know who'd be interested. That keeps me from doing that. You know, and thank you, Scott, for starting this thread, because I really did want to throw it out to those. I mean, I don't want to put anybody in a box, but I'm sure there's a few of us that do not use social media at all. And so I kind of wanted to hear your perspectives on it. If anybody wants to, you know, chime in on that. Ernie.
Yeah, I can really piggyback on what Scott said, because I don't even know what they are. I don't know Twitter. I don't know this. I don't know that. But the one thing I will just throw in is the Facebook. I like knowing about my younger generation because they're on there. I like knowing about what they're talking about with their families. And, but otherwise, it does sound a lot like an addiction. And so even though I don't understand it, don't really know it, have problems with it, I got to pass that addiction up. You know, I haven't passed up my sweet addiction yet, but I do get to pass that one up. And I have felt bad about it till Caroline presented as she did, that, oh, I can't keep up with the times. And, you know I can't keep up with everything as I get older, but I can't keep up with the times of what seems to be the new norm. And I love letter writing. And I still love to read. I miss, newspapers have come back some. And so I do like picking up. Unlike your father, I couldn't go from the beginning to the end, but I really liked going through the paper. And after you listen to certain people's articles, how you kind of look forward to their articles. And yeah, we have to cipher through everything. And it's scary because I used to think I could just go and vote when they explain what, say, the proposition is, or those things. And now I know everybody's tricking us there too. And so it's a scary time in some ways. And it's also refreshing to know that time keeps changing and going on, but how to decipher through it is difficult for me.
Yeah.
But yes, excellent presentation, Carol.
Thank you. Thank you.
I guess it's a matter of trust. Who do we trust? What do we believe anymore? Just because we know things so much is in disinformation. Yeah.
Well,
Margie, what are you thinking?
oh, you're muted.
No, go ahead, Caroline. You were going to say something, right?
When you were talking about trust, I was going to say that local news is always considered the most trustworthy, and the tragedy is that local news is dying. And that's another whole topic. But figuring out ways to support your local news. So.
Well, I was going to just comment on, Ernie, how you said about, being in touch with young people. That's the only reason why Bob and I even started to get on Facebook or whatever, is just so that we knew what our kids were doing, when they moved out, they, got married or whatever. But all these educators in Jesus Collective, we find that our students don't read their emails. They don't, they love a letter, but no one gets mail anymore. But we've had to use social media in order to get students to, like, this event is coming, don't forget the FAFSA opens up, and so my colleague and I, we've talked about, oh, this is like this horrible necessary evil that it's become. And, like, we have to teach kids about these horrible algorithms, but I don't know. It's like it's the only way we can reach them. Like, they're on TikTok and YouTube and not Facebook or anything else. So
yeah, no, if you're using Facebook, you're considered old anymore, I think. Yeah, definitely.
Hopefully they don't turn their notifications off.
Like you did.
Maybe we should have a day where everybody cooperates and we all say no social media and no sweets for Ernie.
Now that's just personal.
Should we organize it on social media?
I know that's the conundrum. Where do you announce you're going off Facebook except Facebook? So.
That was one thing that I tried to do with Facebook. The reason I got on was I wanted to reconnect with people that that I had lost track of, and I wanted to be able to give them my phone number, and so that we could see each other or we could talk. And I found that a lot of people don't want to do that, or they don't understand that that's why I connected with them. And so they won't connect with me except on Facebook. And so those are the people that the ones I've picked and choose, the ones that actually have, we've exchanged phone numbers and we've actually seen each other. Those are the people that I'm trying to get to. And I'm realizing that the other ones are not they're not my tribe, and it's sad, but, I don't want to offend people, by explaining, hey, this is why I'm doing that. And I have offended people, saying, hey, I want to make sure that everything's okay with us. And people get offended with that for some reason. So.
Can you say a little bit more about that, Lisa?
About?
You're trying not to offend, and yet people are offended. What does that look like?
When I say, hey, let me know when if you ever want to talk. And people actually get upset. They get like, they won't talk to me, and they won't even respond to that. And yeah, and it's strange, and I don't understand it. And so I've realized, these people, it almost appears as though they have something against me, and I don't know that they have something against me. And then I can't find out because they won't talk to me. So it's like they want to have something against me, and I don't understand that. So
it almost sounds like what you're saying is that people are saying speak Facebook in the way that some people say speak English.
I don't know.
Huh?
Or
Well,
that they
I don't
really
understand that.
or that they don't really want to be friends, like real friends. They want to be this facade of having people like them.
Yeah.
Or you're useful with me because you crank up my numbers, but I don't really care about you.
Right.
I've noticed too, like a lot of my coworkers, mostly younger, but sort of also, just as time has gone on, friends that I've kept in touch with. I think the ones that I really, really would say like longtime friends, we actually still talk, but like a lot of my cowork, like pick up the phone, call each other, talk, or FaceTime if we don't actually just meet up. But my younger friends and younger coworkers are like, don't ever call, just text me, because I don't pick up the phone. And it's like, oh, I kind of get it, because if you want to just try to get as much stuff done, but I don't know, I'm getting like to a point of like, don't just jam pack your day.
Yeah.
So you can have a relationship with me, please.
And actually have a real connection with somebody.
Right. Yeah.
And a lot of people just don't want, I don't want a real connection. I just want to use you.
Yeah.
So are you saying that intimacy is kind of fearsome, and we'd rather just kind of stay arm's length? It's safer that way?
Well, it's like a whole swipe left, swipe right.
Wow.
So Shella, go ahead and add your comment.
Okay, the term "speak Facebook" that rang
Yeah, I
out.
didn't understand that either.
Speak Facebook, because I've watched some of people on Facebook, and I think a millennial that I know has given me the best understanding of it. Because, and I think, well, at least when you said that immediately clicked in my mind, because all of the things that you do that are great, or I got married, I bought a house, and all of these posts that are put up, and they're all so wonderful of all the things. And this millennial was saying to me, and that's depressing to me.
Yeah.
Hell, I'm depressed. Because what the hell, what am I doing? You know, I can't buy a house, I can't, you know, and so it's almost like a language, you know, that of all the wonderful things. And so what she decided to do is just get off of it. She's like, I'm done with Facebook. I don't even want to do that. I don't want to have to put up what's really happening in my life. It's too real, you know, it's too. And so I think that is, for me, I was on Facebook and I found out that 1 hour turned into 2, turned into 5. I'm like, oh, trying to like everything, trying to love people. I can't do it. I just couldn't do it. So I'm just not on there hardly at all. But I think there is a Facebook language, maybe other social media too, but there is a language that you want a certain image and you have to build that image. But that same person that was putting all that stuff up, I was still on Facebook, and when I went back on there, the one that the person was talking about, she in a couple of years was divorced. But the way she phrased it was such a wonderful mutual thing. Even that was a Facebook.
Yes.
Emily, go ahead.
Okay, great. Sorry, I have to start unmute. Great conversation. Good job, Caroline. Awesome. I'm really good. I'll throw in a couple things because I'm in a similar boat with many of you, and I agree with so much of what you said. But I've been trying to actually find the power and almost heal some of my skepticism and cynicism about just online connection in general, and social media. And actually, the last few weeks I've been trying to spin it around to harness the potential so that best helps me in my career, and using it to have a voice and to be seen and to connect with people I need. And so I'll share 2 things. I mean, I only use social media rigorously for stuff that feeds my career. So it's really more for me like information from other experts or people in health and wellness and spirituality. So I'm sort of ruthless. I put nothing personal pretty much ever. I'm realizing that for my profession as writing and teaching, I will probably shift that a bit. But for example, my Instagram feed is really only people that I admire and respect. And I've learned amazing things from them, like game changing, where you're like, I can't believe you're giving this all away for free. It's so amazing. So one thing for Instagram I found is like just ruthlessly curate it to only things that add value to your life or to the world at large. Still really hard to edit it to where you're not going down wormholes for sure, but it's a good start. So anyway, nothing personal. And so for my personal relationships, I have actually found, I'll just offer this to people, you know, and again, we're like, oh, do we use these or not? But for me, during the pandemic, using like WhatsApp and Signal and apps where you can do voice memos with groups of friends has actually brought so much intimacy. So I've reconnected to girlfriends around the world where we're all having similar feelings, and we leave each other these long messages, and then we can answer back when we have time because we have kids. And it's been so interesting how I have much deeper intimacy with people, but it's highly curated, right? It's like 1 or 2 or 3 people. So I just offer that as like something to think about, like, how can I make these things work for me? And then the third thing is really knowing that we're in this, astrologically, we're in this time where massive new social changed networks and changed ways of connecting are being born. So keeping our ears open for those new next 2.0 networks that are coming, which will not be Facebook and will not be owned by Mark Zuckerberg, and which are being created. And let's all make an intention to be like, hey, you know, maybe I'll join that one. I don't actually know which ones they are, is me, we, or I'm not cool enough to know, but they're coming. and they're going to be driven by the people. And we should just use them and then curate your groups to only the things that serve you. And then what could we do with that is actually kind of cool. So anyway, I'm just putting a little positive spin because I'm trying to reframe it a bit and make it work for me. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Emily. I feel like there's a lot that she talked about. Does anybody want to talk about or respond to anything Emily said?
I'm actually looking into Telegram because I read some interesting things about it. So
I use Telegram. Yeah. And that's much fun. You can be, again, you can get overwhelmed. It's how you curate it. So it's really finding those tribes where this information is helping my life. But again, they can get overwhelming. So it's that same thing. If it's on us and our monkey minds to be like, set boundaries. It is hard. But I agree. There's so much more out there, and just like, let's not throw all the baby out with the bathwater. Because for me, I live a rural life to raise my kid in the middle of nowhere. And I'm like, well, there's a blessing to do, to some of this stuff. It keeps us connected to jobs or, all that. So where's the light in the darkness?
It sounds like, what I'm hearing from so many of you is that it's a tool.
Yeah.
And that it can be a really good tool, a useful tool. So if we could figure out how to harness that. Trina, did you have a comment?
I was just going to say that my son makes a lot of money off of social media. He's a dancer, and he's got a lot of companies that he posts for and wears a hat and wears a sweatshirt, and they send products regularly for him to advertise. And he has the product in his dance videos, and it's a nice little side hustle. So I am not on like TikTok or Instagram, but when he posts a video, again, as an influencer, then he'll let me know, and I'll go on and watch. And he'll ask, did you see the video? Did you see this? Did you see that? So he gets a lot of products and a lot of money off of the media, and it is a way of communicating with folks. He's 22. A way of communicating with folks in his generation that don't have television, that don't have commercials, which was, the way to advertise, don't have magazines, don't have newspapers, don't have anything hard copy, and their way of advertising for products is through social media. So I'm his number 1 fan. Yeah, I'm glad he's able to get some money off of advertising and dancing and bringing in, a paycheck off of his social media.
Well, he's using it as a tool, as you say. Yeah.
Can I add something to what?
Sure.
Following on what Trina's saying, like I think that there is a lot of utility to these companies, and they should be regulated and dealt with as utilities. Like, exactly what you're saying, Trina, like there's so much utility in this thing for your son. So let's look at it like we looked at, CBS, ABC, NBC, like, all those companies, they had rules, they had, fairness doctrines, they had things in place to make sure that they actually serve the public good. So yeah, I think that's the one thing I kind of hope for is that we'll see these companies being viewed more as utilities. Like, we have transportation, we have food infrastructure. Here's our social connection infrastructure. What do we do to keep it, fair and honest and decent? So I don't know.
Thank you. And Scott, looks like you had a comment about Zoom. Did you want to expand on that?
It's just always obvious to me how, especially pandemic and stuff, just remarkable how Zoom connects us, and it's social and it's media, but you know what, it's interactive. The expressions, unless you turn your video off, and I think that's the power of it too, because the whole point is, even with emails, it's problematic because you can write something and think you're saying something that's in one sense that's being completely misunderstood in another, because it lacks the other dimensions of communication.
Lisa?
Oh, I was going to ask Emily, because I wanted to know more about Telegram. I'm wondering if I can talk to her some way, or if she can send some information, how she's experienced.
You could friend her on
I'm just
Facebook.
learning about it. I'm still thinking about, oh my gosh, Emily knows
I'll
Something
put
that
you
I
two in
don't-
touch.
Did you hear what Tanya said, Lisa?
No, what?
She said you could friend her on Facebook.
Oh my God. Yeah,
We can talk on Signal. No, get Signal.
see, I don't even have Signal, so.
It's really
Oh,
good.
But
The voice
that's one
memo.
thing. Here's can I just throw this out?
Sure.
It's like this person was, just trying to share, Telegram was elevated following Zuckerberg's buying out of WhatsApp and subsequently implementing a policy pretty much owning every aspect of your posted sent messages. So that's why Telegram, that's why she was sharing this information about Telegram. And, it's like, she says, check on it for yourself. And I love that. But I had, how do you find out about some of these things? But it's like, I'm not really into putting my personal stuff on Facebook. I've always posted stuff like my pictures of my sunrises and stuff like that. And I accidentally, it was funny because my Instagram account, again, is private too, but I have a lot less people on it because that's where I kind of share what's going on with me. And so I accidentally connected the two recently. And so I put something on Instagram and all of a sudden I'm getting responses of it on Facebook because I realized all these other people have seen it. And I'm like, oh, so, and I realized for stuff like that, I'm a very private person and certain, and so I'm trying to negotiate that, which is another reason why I like to actually speak to people is like, I like to hear what you're saying because it can present in different ways in text. And I feel like I'm misunderstood. And that's why I'm having problems with certain people that don't want to talk to me. And I'm like, I'd like to figure out, wait, you tell me what's going on. And so, yeah, I hate it. It's the worst possible way to communicate. It's the worst possible way to communicate.
Yeah. Thank you, Lisa. That's really a good point. Caroline is saying that we can continue this on Wednesday, and it's such great conversation, you guys. I feel like there's a lot there to still unpack. So maybe we'll continue this conversation on Wednesday. And so, Pastor, are you ready for communion?
Let's have communion. Along with Emily, the personal stuff is not my favorite stuff to put out there. Mostly I preach, but one of the things that started over a decade ago is that whenever Diane and I go out of town, or when I, which used to happen a lot, go out of town, I would never post where I was. Now we have the benefit of Matt being here at the house most of the times when we're gone, but still, I just don't think it's a wise thing for the public to know that we're not in our house, especially someone as public as I can be sometimes. So, and yeah, so I've never wanted anybody to know when Diane was here and no one else was here, that kind of thing. Oh, and Trina